Hi folks, it's Mike Murphy. Today is all about making our own textures, and we're going to be using both Adobe Photoshop and After Effects CC 2025. To make the texture today, I'm going to be using something that is probably familiar to every single one of you, and that is Amazon packaging. First, I'm going to scan the Amazon packaging to my computer using a scanner. Blank side down. For the scanner settings, I'll scan it in as color. I'm just going to be using 300 dpi. If you're working in higher resolutions, you might want to try 600, but just experiment. I'll save it to my desktop, give it a name, format JPEG, click scan. Now I'll bring in the scanned texture on my desktop into Photoshop by selecting the file and just drag it right onto the Photoshop icon. I'm going to duplicate the background layer by pressing Command or Ctrl J. On the duplicate layer, I'm going to convert that for smart filters by going to the top menu, Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. With the duplicate layer selected, I'll go back to the filter menu and choose Camera Raw Filter. If you've never used Camera Raw Filter, this is the exact same engine used in Adobe Lightroom. So first, I'll convert the texture to black and white. I'll just come over here and click on this little button, B and W. Then I'm going to come down to the light section. I'll just bump up the exposure a little bit, and you can play around with any of these settings. I'm just going to bump up the exposure a little bit. I'm just trying to make the texture look even. And to grunge it up a little bit, I'm going to twirl open the effects section. For texture, I'll put in 65. For clarity, I'll put in 5. For dehaze, I'm going to put in 8. Grain, 35. And just like you can in Lightroom, to see a before and after in Camera Raw, just tap on the backslash key. So here's the before or the original, tap backslash again. These are with all the changes. If you want to reset a section, if you hold Option or Alt, you'll see it turns into reset. So I can reset just the effects, I can reset the light, I can reset up here in the color section. And when you're happy with your results in Camera Raw, just click OK. That will return you back into Photoshop. And because this is a smart filter, you can toggle it on or toggle it off. You can also just double click on Camera Raw Filter. That'll return you to Camera Raw. You can make any changes if you ever want to update that layer. I like the black and white texture, but I also want a color version that brings in the original color from the packaging. So what I'm going to do is make a copy of this smart object by right-clicking and choosing New Smart Object via Copy. By doing that, I can make changes to the Camera Raw filter, and it's not going to update this other smart object. So I'll double click on Camera Raw to return to Camera Raw. I'm going to click on black and white to reintroduce the color and click OK. So now I've got a color version and a black and white version. Now would be a good time to save your Photoshop document so you can always go back and modify your textures. So just go to the File menu at the top and choose Save As. Give your texture a name. For the format, choose Photoshop. That ends in the .psd, then click Save. Now I'll show you an easy way that we can animate the texture right inside of Photoshop. And I am just going to be animating a copy of the color version. So first, I'll go to the image menu at the top and choose Duplicate. This is going to create a new Photoshop document. I'll give it a name, and I'm going to check this box to duplicate the merged layers only. I'll click OK. Now I'm in a new Photoshop document, and I just have the one merged texture layer. The first thing I'm going to do is just change the canvas size to a 1920 by 1080 pixels. So I'll go to Image, Canvas Size, 1920 by 1080. When I press Command or Ctrl T, you can see that the texture is bigger than the canvas size. This is helpful when you're animating textures, as we're going to be moving the texture around to get some variation. I'm going to duplicate this layer by pressing Command or Ctrl J, and I'm just going to repeat that until I have a total of 6 layers. So Command J, Command J, Command J, Command J. And you can rename these just to keep things in order. Now you're just going to select each layer one by one, press Command or Ctrl T for free transform, and just randomly transform. Change the rotation, the position, you can change the scale. Click the check mark at the top to commit the changes, or just press Command or Control, Enter, Return. Repeat this for every layer. Select it, Command or Control T, make random changes. Now open the Timeline panel. Go up to the top, choose Window, Timeline. Make sure that Create Frame Animation is selected, then click on the button to create a timeline. Now go to the hamburger menu in the top right corner, those 3 horizontal lines, and choose Make Frames from Layers. If I tap the spacebar or click on the little play icon, you can see we have an animation. Cool. I'll tap the spacebar to stop. Now when you select a frame number down in the timeline, you're going to see the little eyeball for visibility jump to that corresponding layer. So if I click 2, you'll see it jumps up to 2. As you're previewing your animation and clicking through each frame, maybe you decide that you want to change the rotation or the scale or the position of one of the frames. Well, when you have the frame selected in the timeline, just make sure that you select the corresponding layer, then you can make changes and it will just update that frame. To customize the speed, I'll click on frame 1, then hold the Shift key and click on the last frame. Now all the frames are selected. And if you look at the bottom of each frame, they're currently set to 0 seconds or no delay. So I can just click on any one of these. It's going to open up this little pop-up. You see it's checked at no delay, and you can just go through these presets one by one. So you can try 0.1, tap the spacebar. That looks pretty good. Click, Shift click to select them all, and just go through these. That looks pretty good to me too. It's got kind of a stop motion feel. And maybe I want something right in between the first 2. Shift click, so they're all selected. I'll click and I can choose other. Maybe I want 0.15 to split the difference between the first 2 presets. Tap the spacebar. Perfect. And to export your animation from Photoshop, go to the top menu, File, Export, Render Video. Give it a name, choose where you want to save it, choose Adobe Media Encoder H.264 high quality 1920 1080 pixels. I'll change the frame rate to 24 frames per second, then click Render. There's our rendered video on the desktop. It's currently only 1 second long, but we're going to fix that in After Effects. So go ahead and open up After Effects. We'll import that video file in the project panel. I'll just double click in an empty space. That'll open up Finder. I'm going to select the video file, click Open. I'll create a new composition. I'm just going to use the preset 1920 by 1080 pixels, 24 frames per second. For the duration, I can make this anything I want. I'm just going to put 30 seconds, so 30, comma, background color does not matter. Click OK. I'll drag our texture animation onto the composition window. Tap the spacebar, looks good, but it's only 1 second long and I'm unable to extend it down the timeline. Here's the magical fix. Select the texture animation in the project panel, right click, go to Interpret Footage, Main. Go to the very bottom to where it says Loop. I'm just going to put in 100 to make sure we have enough. Click OK. Now I can extend it all the way down the timeline. Tap the spacebar to preview, and now you have this awesome texture animation that you can reuse over and over again in your projects, and you created it from scratch using a simple Amazon package. How cool is that? Use the tint effect to create a black and white version like we did in Photoshop, or use the tint effect if you want to add color to your textures. Maybe you want to use your textures as track mats so you can place them inside of text and shape layers. Sky is the limit. So now you know what you can do with all of that Amazon packaging that is taking over your house. You can create textures and animate them in Photoshop, bring them into After Effects. My name is Mike Murphy. Cheers.